You're listening to a bonus episode of The Dairy Edge featuring Teagasc's weekly Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, which is also available as a podcast.
Good morning, everyone. You're very welcome to this week's Let's Talk Dairy webinar. We have Padraig O'Connor. Padraig's part of the Dairy KT team. Padraig is going to talk about efficient milking and practices around that, maybe to improve efficiency at farm level. And Padraig has extensive expertise, I'll say, Padraig, in this area. And has had a lot of conversations, workshops, so on and so forth with farmers down through the years. So Padraig, I suppose, firstly, in terms of maybe why are we having this conversation, efficiency around milking time, the importance of it at farm level, why is that important?
Yeah, look, I suppose, first of all, it takes up a lot of time. You know, it takes up, I suppose, if we look at labour studies over the years, it's taken up about maybe a third of the dairy farmer's working day. You know, so it's very time consuming, and I suppose anything that will help to reduce that, you know, is going to be a benefit. It's going to be a plus. So I suppose, look, at the key point really is that we're producing a food, and it has to be produced at the highest quality. We are expecting consumers to consume the food. You know what I mean? So the quality of the product is key. The second one is that, look, it needs to be a pleasant experience for both the milker and for the cows. And if it is, it's going to be enjoyable. And I suppose the last part is that, you know, we need to be as efficient as we can in the parlour without actually cutting corners. And sometimes people maybe get confused between, you know, being efficient and being as fast as you can. We're talking about being efficient without actually cutting corners and incorporating, you know, good quality milk. Actually, producing good quality milk is the key component here, really, James.
I think that's an important point ultimately, in terms of you're trying to speed up the process, Padraig, and we'll talk about some of those maybe options. But ultimately, as you say, in terms of the process is still to the highest of standards.
Yeah.
Talk to me. I was looking at a little bit of work there by Martina Gormley lately in terms of milking times, and nationally we're still it's probably the one thing that dictates the end of day finishing time, and just looking at some of the stats, they're still fairly alarming. The conversations you're having with farmers, when should milking time start, I suppose, and it's probably that, okay, morning milking, but it's really that afternoon milking time probably.
Yeah, and look, as you say, James, you know, when milking is finished in the evening time, that really dictates the end of the working day, isn't it? You know, I suppose in the last couple of years, I have seen a bit of a swing back, especially some of the younger generation of farmers coming in, that they're actually starting to milk earlier. And I suppose that's coming from pressures as well from a family situation. You know, realistically, you know, these are family people. They have young kids. So their partner, you know, is expecting, you know, them to be in at a reasonable hour, you know. So there is a bit of a sea change there in terms of, you know, the time of evening milking, you know, so as the day is shorter, because ultimately, you know, in a lot of situations, the end of the milking in the evening time is the end of the working day is the end of the working day for the farmer, apart from maybe calving time or breeding time, when you have to do a little bit more, maybe in terms of that, you know.
Yeah. And come here, so that really is from a labour perspective, that's a mentality thing as such. From an animal performance point of view, all the analysis point that there's no issue.
There's no issue, absolutely no issue. You know, the milking interval, you know, 12 as opposed to, you know, a shorter one. It's, you know, it's there's nothing in it really, James, to be quite honest with you. You know what I mean? So the excuse that some farmers have, maybe some of the older generation, maybe, you know, is that, you know, it's going to affect milk solid yield or milk volume yield. It's not the case from our research and down in Moore Park anyhow, you know. So that doesn't stand really, you know. So yeah.
So that kind of 7 in the morning, 3:30 in the afternoon.
Yeah, in the afternoon.
It's quite adequate.
Absolutely.
Very good. So take me through, I suppose. The cows are in the paddock as such. We're going to step through maybe the milking process. Talk to me about the cows maybe coming from the paddock to the collecting yard. What have you seen? What makes for efficiency around that area?
Yeah. So I would say the milking process, James, starts from the time the cows are collected from the paddock or the shed, but mainly the paddock, in through the roadways and into the parlour and out again. So I suppose, all those building blocks, need to be looked at, so I would say at the farm roadway first. And we're not going to spend long on this, but it's just, so farmers might say to me, maybe in the month of October, for example, it's nearly taking longer for them to get the cows from the paddock into the milking parlour as opposed to the milking itself. So that would indicate to me that, the roadways are poor, So I suppose that's why we're just going to focus on it for a couple of minutes. The roadway, the width of the roadway, first of all, it needs to be, I would say, minimum 5 meters, for 100 cows. And, for every 100 cows after that, it's 1 meter greater in width. You know what I mean? So the width of the roadway is important. And it's also important that the full width of the roadway is actually utilised. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you might see a little pat up the centre of the roadway. Now, that's an indication to me that, cows are trying to suss out the softest part of it, so there's probably an issue with the surface of the roadway. So the width of the roadway, the surface that's on the roadway, and the camber as well. Now, I was on a farm there recently, and there was a lovely roadway put in, but the camber was too steep. And like if you envisage yourself walking along the side of a hill, you'll actually try to go to the top or to the bottom where it's level, because it's uncomfortable. And it's also uncomfortable for the cow as well, James. If she's walking on an uneven surface, actually she won't like it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So the camber is really important. So there are 3 aspects of it. And I suppose the last part in the roadway is that, and again, I saw this, a new roadway put up recently, and the fence was right up to the road. So the cows weren't actually able to utilize the full width of the roadway. So that fence at the side of the road needs to be half a meter outside the end of the road itself, if you get me, you know what I mean? So as the animal can actually, the cow's belly can, they can utilize the full width of the roadway as well.
And often I've seen on farms, Padraig, you'd see maybe roadway structured quite good as you work your way through the farm, and then to come into these bottleneck points coming into yards. Just maybe talk to me about, entering that collecting yard and the importance of space with regard to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're 100%, James. Like the roadway is perfect, but then where they enter from the roadway into the collecting yard, maybe there's a gate half the width of what the roadway is. So you're actually restricting. It's a pinch point that you're restricting the cows from getting in there. Do you know what I mean? So again, it's important that that the entrance into the collecting yard is the full width of what the roadway is, so there's no pinch point there. I suppose the other thing in relation to the roadways is that if you have bends, and you will have bends in the roadway, but just keep them to a minimum. It's just to make sure that they're it's not a right angle instead of a sort of a broad turn as well. So sometimes I say to farmers, if you have time, if you have a relief milker in, just look at the cows coming from the paddock into the parlour and see is there any parts where the cows stop. See is there any pinch points, because if the cows stop, there's an issue with that part of the roadway, and it just needs to be addressed. And sometimes, it's not a big issue. Do you know what I mean?
It could be as simple as a surface issue. It needs maybe resurfacing or something like that.
Exactly. So that's, they're just a couple of key points around the roadway part of it, James.
And we move on then, I suppose, in terms of the importance of the roadways, making sure that we've good width coming into the collecting yard, as little turns as possible. Talk to me then about cow flow, and what we might do is maybe walk the cows up through as such, and we'll come back to the milking process then.
Yeah.
But talk to me about cow flow in terms of, how can you aid cow flow in the whole process? Because ultimately that's the one that maybe really will speed up that milking process then.
Oh, absolutely. I think, and I would say to farmers, I think if you can improve cow flow, or if you can get cow flow correct, that will make the milking much, much easier. Do you know what I mean? We're expecting a 500 or 600 kg animal to get from the paddock through the roadway into the paddock, through the parlour and back out again. So really, we want to make that as easy as possible. So there's no obstructions. There's nothing, that's going to inhibit that animal from actually going through that process. So like what we mean by cow flow is the cows flowing from the paddock through the roadway, into the collecting yard, and through the parlour itself. And again, maybe one of the key areas there is, collecting yards. Maybe the parlour was extended, but the collecting yard is still the same. Do you know what I mean? And there isn't enough room there. And if you have cows crushed or squeezed into a collecting yard, it's going to have an impact on maybe, they'll be more stressed. Maybe the cell count is going to be elevated as a result. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose trying to look at it from a cow's point of view, one of our colleagues, Patrick Going, would always say, what do cows need? The cows need plenty of space and straight lines as much as possible. And if you think of that in relation to when you're setting up the whole system, you won't go too far wrong, actually, James. Do you know what I mean?
It's probably something. What's the requirement in terms of collecting yard space? And our farmer viewers is probably something that isn't thought about a lot, but it'd be worth stepping out this evening and seeing what actual space, what is the adequate numbers for your collecting yard space.
Yeah, it's a good point, James. It's 1.5 meters squared per cow, in the collecting yard. And look, if you have a bigger type of animal, that needs to be a little bit more. And I suppose with the crossbred, maybe a little bit less. But you're not talking average, maybe 1.5 square meters per cow. The other point I didn't actually mention is in relation to maybe cow flow, James, is that if animals are coming along the roadway, or if animals are actually in the collecting yard, and if their heads are up, it means they're being rushed, or it means that they're being squeezed too tightly. So that's maybe a good little tip for farmers. If maybe you have a relief milker, and I'm not blaming relief milkers now, but if whoever is driving the cows and their heads are up, it means they're being pushed, you know what I mean? And you will actually have more lameness as a result as well, as the cow's being stressed. Do you know what I mean? So again, collecting yard size is really, really important. Do you know what I mean? And again, look, Rome wasn't built in a day. I appreciate that, farmers might put in the units first, and then maybe follow up with the collecting yard, maybe extending the collecting yard as well, James.
Very good. And then I suppose, look at as we move up through the parlour, maybe cows enter and cows exit, and talk to me about that. Have you come across any tips or tricks in that area? Yeah,
I suppose back in the day, and I suppose unfortunately I remember this, but you had with older parlours, maybe you had, instead of the meal bin, a steel meal bin, you had maybe the meal was in a loft over the milking parlour, and like the milking parlours were dungeons. They were really, really dark, and if you're expecting cows to walk from a bright collecting yard into a dark parlour, they don't want to do it, James. You know what I mean? So look, I would say, and it's not that common now. I'd say most parlours are fairly okay in that respect, but have the light as much as possible the same where the collecting yard is, when they're going into the milking parlour as well. So light is a big one there, So and it's nice and open and bright and airy. That's really the big one on the entry. Do you know what I mean? And again, making sure that they're kind of funneled into the back of the parlour as well. So there's no sharp objects or whatever like that cows won't actually get. Sometimes now I'm talking about very basic stuff, but sometimes they're missed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And look at, for our viewers, in terms of if you're having to get out, Padraig, and bring in several rows of cows, ultimately there's something wrong.
There's something wrong,
and it's adding time to the whole the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely.
The exit then.
Again, it's having sufficient room for a full row of cows from the exit gate, maybe to the drafter if you have a drafter. Do you know what I mean? So you're not actually restricting the cows coming in to the parlour, the next row coming in. Do you know what I mean? So sufficient space and sufficient room at the front of the parlour, and maybe where they're going outside of the shed is really, really important. I'll give you just a quick one there, James. I was in a parlour there about 2 years ago, and I was watching the milking. And I suppose the other thing is that, you could ask a farmer what they do with milking time, and they say A, B, and C, and they'll give you all the right answers, which I would myself, But it's not until you're actually there to watch the milking, you'll actually pick up an awful lot of stuff. Anyway, I was in this milking parlour one day at the milking, and when the cows were going out, the meal bin was actually at the very front of the parlour, but there was a little bit of meal, the way sometimes it kind of leaks out from the bin. And every second or third cow was actually stopping to lick the meal. So that was having a big effect on the cows going, moving out of the parlour. And all that the farmer actually did after having a discussion was to put a little bit of that stock boarding up, and sometimes it doesn't cost a fortune, to maybe to rectify just that the whole cow flow thing as well, James. So yeah.
Very good. I see one we had a wee chat before this, and ultimately another one there, opening the exit gate early. Talk to me there. You're talking about very experienced people here now that has been doing this for years, huh?
Oh yeah, but yeah. Look, I suppose first of all, like I'd always be starting to milk from the front of the parlour back. Do you know what I mean? So, and it's from that perspective I'm talking about opening the exit gate early, James. So when you're back, let's say you're milking in a 16-unit parlour, and you've started from front of the parlour, and your springs, your teeth springs, you're going back along as well. So that's important that you have that done. So when you're at the back of the parlour, you can actually open the exit gate. When you're at the back, maybe transferring the last 2 or 3 units. So as the cows that are finished milking that you're taking the clusters off of can actually filter out themselves. Do you know what I mean? So in actual fact, what you're doing is, the cows are filtering out by themselves, which they're more relaxed. You're actually, maybe you're working at the back of the parlour doing the milking. So there's 2 jobs going on at the same time. Do you know what I mean? So you're not kind of rushing the cows out, if that makes sense, James.
It does, absolutely.
Absolutely. So that, and in actual fact, I would say to farmers, you could save maybe if by that, little tweaking alone, you could actually save maybe 2 minutes per row. If you have 8 rows, that's 15 or 16 minutes by making just a small little change there. Do you know what I mean? So the changes that I'm talking about, sometimes they're not drastic changes, James. Do you know what I mean?
They're twice a day. I'm not saying everyone on the call is milking twice a day every day, but ultimately, a lot of people are probably going to be doing maybe 8 or 10 milkings a week at a minimum. They do add up in terms of the whole
absolutely
time spent around the process.
Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
we've got the cows from the paddock to the collecting yard, up through the parlour and out. The bit we've missed out on as such, and I wanted to leave it to last, is the actual milking time. Talk to me maybe about prep and preparation.
I
suppose from a farmer and a cow perspective.
I suppose there's 2 aspects here. One is, the farmer, the milker, preparing themselves, and I suppose the other one is preparing the cows. So I suppose we'll start off with the milker first. I would always say, James, that the milker is a conduit between the milking machine and the cow. And they can either be very good or very bad in terms of maybe transferring bacteria or infection from one cow to the other. You know what I mean? So it's a given for me that, you have a clean parlour apron or parlour suit, whatever you wear. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. That's clean and kept clean during the milking. And I suppose the other thing is that you're wearing these nitrile disposable gloves, and research has shown now that, that if you wear these nitrile disposable, and I suppose gloves that fit you as well. Sometimes, farmers say to me, oh, look, I started off and I couldn't get used to them. Now, in fairness, most farmers are wearing gloves at the moment. So I think we won that battle, really. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I suppose the reason is that if dirt gets on the glove, you can wash it off very quickly, and it'll be washed off completely. Whereas your hand, there's crevices in your hand, and it's hard to, you know what I mean. So that's the glove one. So you're making sure that you keep yourself clean, and you have a clean parlour apron or a parlour suit and nitrile disposable gloves, and they're not self-disinfecting. You have to keep them clean. If you have a cow with mastitis, you wash and you spray your hand before you move on to the next cow. Just that's common sense, James.
Little point having gloves and maybe not disinfecting them as you work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the cow side of things.
The cow side of it. Look at basically clusters have to go on to clean dry teats. I mean that's a given. Now look at legally we're supposed to be drawing cows before we put on the cluster. I'm living in the real world. It's not happening in a lot of places. But I suppose as a compromise, what people are doing there is, in the springtime when the bacterial challenge is greater, they're actually, doing a lot of the stuff. They're stripping the cows, they're prepping the cows a bit more because of the fact, you know what I mean? And then when they get out onto this time of the year, well, if the weather was a little bit better, so it's just to be, look at, I suppose the other thing is that I would say to farmers, they say, I don't have time to strip cows. And I would say, during the summertime, maybe when you're in peak milk production, would you ever be waiting for the clusters to come off? Oh, yeah. But like I would say, well, you have time in smaller parlours. You would have time to strip the cows. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's the ideal, if you can. But look, I'm a realist as well. In some of the bigger parlours, it is more difficult. Do you know what I mean? But yeah,
talk to me about applying water.
Yeah, look at
this is an issue, and it's probably something that.
Yeah.
These things, if people have been doing it, they're inclined to stay doing it. But just talk to me about that.
Absolutely, I would say, James. Bottom line of that is keep water to a minimum. You don't need to wash the cow unless it's wet dirt, to be quite honest with you. You know what I mean? So keep water to. And I'm also talking about, like, if a cow dungs in the parlour, some people are devils, for getting the high volume hose and hosing it down, and the stuff goes all over the place. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's full of bacteria. All those little droplets, that you create as a result are full of bacteria. So keep the hose to a minimum. I would say as well, some farmers, and I've seen, they have these small scrapers with a short handle on them, that straight squeegees, they'll push that in when the row of cows go out instead of actually using water. Do you know what I mean? Little things like that, can be a big advantage,
So we've cows prepped, then applying clusters, and I know you do a lot of work in terms of swapping hands and so on and so forth. Yeah. I don't think we can give viewers a live demo today.
No, we'll spare them today. And I suppose some people are saying, "Oh Jesus, here he goes again." But look at, I suppose, the milking routine is more than changing hands, as we're discussing, James. You know what I mean? But look at, for younger people starting off, if you can use both hands for holding the cluster. Look at the average cluster at the moment is about 3 kgs, right? And if you're milking 100 cows, you're lifting 300 kgs per milking. Do you know what I mean? So if you're milking twice a day, that's 600 kgs. That's over half a ton. Some farmer said to me recently, if that was a machine, I'm not going to use the expletive he used. Do you know what I mean? But you know where I'm coming from there. And I suppose what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it a little bit more comfortable and a little more easier on people that are milking big numbers of cows quite frequently. Do you know what I mean? And that's when you're holding the cluster, that you're using both hands to hold the cluster. Like, we're not going to go, it's hard to go into detail in this kind of
ultimately, but we do see people that have been years milking cows ultimately where they've shoulder issues and so on and so forth, Padraig, and you're trying your best to reduce those instances.
Absolutely. And I do accept as well, James, that for some people that are milking cows for years, that it is more difficult. And I accept that completely as well. It took me a good while. I was always, using one hand when I was milking back in the day. Do you know what I mean? And it took me a good while. It took me, a month or 5 weeks to try, to be comfortable with that. You know what I mean? Absolutely.
We have a question in there from Sean. Which is better, to pre-dip a cow before stripping or to spray your hands before stripping each cow?
I suppose it depends on the type of bacteria that you're talking about. You know what I mean? So I suppose pre-spraying is something that maybe if you have an environmental type of mastitis, that I suppose that pre-spraying will actually help there. Look at, both will actually help. Both will help, but it depends on the levels of SCC that you have, and it depends on maybe the type of bacteria that you have as well. So I would be saying to Sean, look at if you can maybe get some culture and sensitivity tests done to see, well, what type of bacteria is causing the problem. If you have a problem on the farm, do you know what I mean? And maybe work back from there. Then, like, if you take it, pre-spraying cows, like, can be beneficial, but it's another chore that you have. That's another chore that you have and to do as well when you're milking. Do you know what I mean? So,
that maybe leads into the next question in terms of high cell count cows. Unfortunately, there's usually some of them in every herd. Talk to me. What should listeners be doing with them?
Yeah. Well, I suppose ultimately, if they're chronic and if they've been high for a while, there's only one place for them, and it's up in a hook. Do you know what I mean? Away. Out of the farm. Do you know what I mean, James? Is
that not the last thing farmers want to do with these cows, Padraig?
Well, actually, that's a good point. The problem with those cows, James, is that they are costing the farmer a fortune. They are costing the farmer a fortune in that, the amount of revenue lost as a result of loss of production, or maybe infecting other cows. That's the issue with those cows. Do you know what I mean? And ultimately, yes, And I was that victim myself, that you'd have cow, oh no, she's a high BI, she calves once a year, every year, she's, you know, like, she's fit, she's ticking all the boxes. But I would say, look, if you have high cell count cows, you need to deal with them in terms of, you know, not letting those cows infect other cows. Okay. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, if you have a cow that was high last year, she went through a dry cow period and she went through her dry cow antibiotics, and she's high again this year, she certainly shouldn't be in the herd. Yeah. Okay. That's the first point. The second point, James, is that if you have 4 or 5 cows that are millionaires and they're coming through the herd, well, I suppose the first thing is, if you can actually milk those cows last, that's the ideal.
Yeah.
I'm also conscious of the fact that it's not maybe practical for some farmers to do that. And if that's the case and they're coming through the herd, those clusters needs to be dipped with water and peracetic acid before you put it onto the next cow. The third point that I'll make on that, James, is that what some farmers are doing, some of the farmers that have good systems in terms of maybe a good drafting, the cows are coming in, they don't milk the cows when they come in, you know, first. They'll actually put them through the drafter, put them around again, and let them come back again. Now, you're talking about, okay, that those cows are coming in twice. But look at, you know, it's a big saving in terms of breaking that cross-infection from the infected cow to the uninfected cow, James.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. During that whole milking process. Another one, too, about those high cell count cows, Padraig, is ultimately the chronic ones, now is the time ultimately to be taking those out of the herd. Yeah. Often we hear farmers, oh yeah, well sure, she has to go, she's high cell count.
Yeah.
And next October type of thing, or November.
Which she has an awful lot of damage done, James, you know.
A pile of harm done.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In terms of post-teat disinfection, I think we're bound to be at a stage where that's commonplace and it's best practice. But just talk to me about that in terms of technique, in terms of volumes, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, very good point, James. And if you look at one of the key areas that Animal Health Ireland have, for example, is, you know, proper post-teat infection, post-teat disinfection. And I suppose 2 areas here. One is, you know, putting on the proper amount. So we're talking about, you know, putting on 15 mils per cow per milking, and covering the whole battle of the teat, you know. And it's a practice I do with farmers now. I'll get the farmer I use these dummy udders, and I would actually get the farmer to spray as they'd normally spray a cow, and you do what is called the towel test, and you'd put just a piece of that paper towel for drying teats, put it around the teat after the farmer has actually sprayed the cow, and you know you'll take it off to see and you see a lot of blanks in it, you know. So in other words, that, you know, the coverage isn't great. So I would say, you know, first of all, you know, ascertain, are you putting on the amount by looking, you know, by doing a calculation of, you know, okay, a drum of T-tip is lasting me whatever. I have so many cows, and, you know, you do that calculation fairly easily. I suppose the other thing is that, you know, spraying those cows when they're in situ, as opposed to spraying them when they're walking out of the parlour. Do you know what I mean? If cows are walking out of the parlour and you're spraying them, for me, you know, you're not doing the job properly. And I suppose just to remember why it's so important from a mastitis point of view and from a cell count point of view, you know, to post teat disinfect properly. Do you know what I mean? So it's you know, you're doing it anyway. It's just, you know, maybe, you know, do it a little more. And I'm not saying all farmers now, there's some farmers out there doing fantastic jobs with it. In some cases now I've seen, you know, it's a kind of a bit of a lick of post-teat disinfection.
Is there something around a figure of 8 or something in terms of technique, just to make sure that you get good coverage, Padraig, or ultimately that you're getting good coverage in terms of using your teat sprays?
Yeah, I would say, you know, you need to go on the figure of 8 is right, James. You know what I mean? So you're actually, you know, you're making a better effort to try to, instead of just putting it in and bringing it back out again, you know. So yes, the figure of 8 is you know, it's one of the ways we would have actually teaching students or whatever in terms of trying to get that T-tip on, you know what I mean? Absolutely. I suppose the other one, just in relation to T-tip, and I think it's a given now, I think, go for the one that's ready made. You know, if you go for a T-tip, you know, that you have to make up, there's too many variables in it. Maybe you might have hard water, you know, maybe there might be some issue with the water, you know, just get a T-tip that's ready to go. You know, it's much easier, I think, James.
Very good. We're running out of time, but ultimately maybe one last point in terms of any tips around washing up or.
Yeah, and that's a good point, James. Some farmers will say to me, "God, I put in a new milking parlour, and it's taking me an age to wash up." You know what I mean? And I actually do agree with them. You know, so maybe and actually these are from farmers that I picked up over the years as well. You know, using maybe these defoliation gloves for washing the clusters at the end of milking. You know, they're kind of the women use them for taking the makeup off. You know, so they're kind of rougher, so as you know you'll actually get the dirt off much easier. The other thing I've seen farmers use actually, James, is just a power hose with the lance turn off it. You know, so you just have the handle. You know, and that seems to be quite good as well. And it's just, I suppose, trying to make the washing up of the parlour just a little bit easier. And the last point there is, James, instead of, you know, having a kind of a gully where the cow's front feet are, so as the water, you know, the water goes into that, so as you're not washing the whole cow stand area all down, you know, so little bits and pieces like that make it easier and make it quicker, you know, to wash the parlour as well.
Very good. I think, Padraig, in terms of we've had a very comprehensive chat in terms of walking the cow ultimately right through from the paddock, through the collecting yard, up through the parlour, and then the whole milking process. And I suppose there's lots of tips and tricks, as you say, and a lot of them may be picked up from farmers down through the years, Padraig, and put alongside best practice. So just maybe comment on, ultimately, I know you do a lot of this and there's practicals, there's actually a course out there, just maybe the final comment in terms of you actually have a course covering a lot of this, which is useful to farmers alike, but maybe relief milkers or staff members or whoever it is.
Yeah, relief milkers and farmers. Yeah, we have there's 4 courses coming up, and we have there's one next week coming up in Roscrea. There's one in Limerick in the week after, and then there's one in Ballyhaise in June and one in Moorpark in June as well. So look at those details can be gotten in either the Teagasc website or the FRS website as well, James. You know, so it's a level 6 course, and it's going through, you know, in more detail what we have went through there this morning. You know, so and we try to have it as practical as we can. So there's real time milking in it as well. You know what I mean? So it's just covering all those aspects there. And look at a lot of what I have said this morning, farmers probably know, but it's just refreshing the mind as well to see, is there any parts that maybe I can make it a little bit easier? Or the other part is, like, if there's somebody coming into milk as well, that you have that's some sort of a structure, but there's some sort of a routine there as well. Do you know what I mean? In terms of
idea of SOPs, Padraig, is it?
SOPs. Thanks for reminding me, actually, James. But SOPs, they're a big part of, if you have somebody coming into milk, you know, it makes it much easier for the owner, because there's a step-by-step there for the person. And, you know, and like farmers expect somebody coming into milk that, they should pick it up like that. But it's not like that. Do you know what I mean? So just, I suppose, make it a little bit easier for the person coming in, you know, like, you know, just, and all it needs to be a simple step-by-step guide as to, you know, do this, do that, put in the milk filter sock, make sure the pipe is at the bowl tank, all these kind of things. And actually, you know, talking to relief milkers, they love that. Do you know what I mean? So they can cross-check it, especially if they haven't been in there before. Do you know what I mean? So yeah.
Thank you very much, Padraig.
No problem,
as I say, very comprehensive, and I think there's lots in that in terms of it's something, as you say, maybe we take for granted, but it's worth our listeners maybe just take a step back, maybe walk through the process and see, is there little areas that can, as you say, Padraig, it could be 5 or 10 minutes here or there, but ultimately that adds up over the course of a week, month and year. So look at, we have Chloe Miller on next week from the Tipperary Calf to Beef demo farm. So Chloe's going to give us an insight in terms of what's happening there. And what I would say is, as always, farm safely, folks. So see you then.
That's all for this week's bonus episode from the Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, and don't forget to look out for more bonus episodes each week. I'll be back with the usual Dairy Edge podcast on Monday, so do listen in then. I'm Stuart Childs, and thanks for listening.